Hey everyone, what you're about to see is a complete remake of a video I dropped back in 2019 titled How Toby Fox Put Sans Over. The reason it's being remade is because about a year later, WWE copyright struck it into the pavement and you can't watch it here anymore. Because so many of you have asked and because the video was pretty popular, instead of just fixing the copyrighted parts, I'm re-releasing it with a new juicy script, new up-to-date examples, a new take on the voiceover, and with all of the editing experience I've accumulated in the 4+ years since I originally made this. So yeah, enjoy, and complete and total spoilers for Undertale and Titanic. If you had to guess, how deep underwater do you think the Titanic's wreckage is? You probably don't know the exact number, but do you think it's deeper or more shallow than like 800 feet or about 240 meters? If you said deeper, you're right, but give me a good guess. How deep do you think it is? If you guessed about 12,500 feet, or 3,800 meters, you were right on the money. Congratulations. But odds are, most of you were short of that number, and believe it or not, I might have manipulated you into guessing too low. I'm Daryl, and for old time's sake, welcome to Psych of Play. Sans from Undertale is unquestionably one of the most infinitely studied, reproduced, reiterated, and regurgitated characters in a video game ever. If you've chosen to watch this, there is a better chance of you being a left-handed homeless lottery winner who was just struck by lightning than this being your first ever Sans video. The first notes to Megalovania are tattooed into our DNA. You've probably heard he's voiced by Patrick Star, kind of. You probably didn't beat him, but even if you did, you certainly watched another human being do it. And if you saw the original video that this one is based on, you know how Toby Fox got him over. Now, over is a word that we will need to define because it's a word that is used in the world of pro wrestling quite a bit. You see, wrestling, like books, like television, like film, like theater, like anime, like manga, like video games, is all about presentation, how characters are portrayed to be. And as a creator of a story, you can communicate those characters in quite a few ways: dialogue, appearance, names, facial expressions, decisions. And while Sans is portrayed through all of these avenues, what I think makes him special is that if you look at how Toby Fox presents him in Undertale through the lens of pro wrestling, he's also communicated in one of the most rewarding ways imaginable. But I'm getting ahead of myself. For this to make sense, before we define over, we need to establish a few other tiny things. The first is that yes, wrestling is fake in the same way that Batman is fake. The events that take place are scripted, predetermined, and dressed up with theatrics. Both are forms of storytelling, one sold as a dark film noir in the imaginary city of Gotham, and the other sold as a live, eccentric combat sport in front of an audience. Both are creating an illusion that the characters are interacting and feuding with one another to progress a greater narrative. As a viewer, you have to accept that real-life friends Jay Resso and Adam Copeland are playing bitter enemies in the same way you have to accept that Robert Pattinson is simply playing a part as Batman. There is a suspension of disbelief that must take place in both cases here, and to maintain that suspension, the performers have to demonstrate each other's skill by showing that a move was, extraordinarily painful, even if it was only uncomfortable. This is called selling and is one of the best ways to communicate to the audience that the one performing the move is the real deal. If something looks like it would hurt, it should look like it hurt. If a guy looks tough, it should look like he's tough. But even more important than the selling is the booking. Who gets to fight who? And this brings us back to the Titanic and a little something called anchoring bias. Unless you had just looked it up online or happened to be a Titanic historian, it's incredibly unlikely that you would have had any idea off the top of your head just how deep the Titanic's wreckage is currently sitting. Rarely do any of us just casually think about how deep the ocean really is, so it's a true shot in the dark for most people. But when I threw a number out there, you suddenly had a place to start. You could at least begin to get an idea for how deep it was. and since I started you at 800 feet, you probably didn't stray too terribly far from that number. This is anchoring bias in a nutshell. When we're making a numerical estimate on something arbitrary, we're often unconsciously swayed by the number we start at. This tendency was first pointed out by Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky in the 70s. That first figure, however irrelevant, outrageous, or strange it may seem, even when we don't realize it's happening, can strongly influence our judgment. And as you can imagine, it can absolutely be exploited. Imagine a car salesman, right? They might start you out at an unrealistically high price so that even if you haggle down, it won't stray too far from that original figure. A ton of your reasoning is based on that initial anchor. So let me ask you this. What if I had started you at 500,000 feet deep and then you adjusted from there? What would that have done to your guess? Regardless of if you had adjusted up or down, your number would have been wildly too deep, but that would have been your sincere first guess since you wouldn't have known where to start. And if I am a wrestling promoter or even a game designer, and I want a character to come off as frighteningly powerful, what am I going to do? The term over originates from the old wrestling lingo of one wrestler winning and going over, while the loser was the jobber and did the dirty job of intentionally losing to make the other guy look good. After all, if you want to tell the audience that a character is strong, you have to show them that by having that character rack up some wins. Which is why there were like 10 episodes of DBZ where Frieza walked all over Goku's pals, and why Thanos easily killed Loki in the first scene of Infinity War, and why Darth beat Obi-Wan, and probably why this guy killed all of those other guys in that one show. I think I still haven't watched this. Wins and losses matter in storytelling, but not quite as much as who a character defeats. Because keep in mind, a wrestler's actual skill in the story can't really be quantified like the depth of the Titanic. It's numerically arbitrary. It's an illusion. But the anchoring bias is still in play. With the result of every single matchup, we are subconsciously making an estimate of how strong a character truly is based on who they just competed against. The opponent is the anchor. So if I am selling a wrestler to the audience as powerful and want to get him or her over, they need to win against another wrestler who is already massively respected or feared. A great recent example of this is Cody Rhodes, who is kind of on top of the world right now. But before he was this guy, he was this guy. A mid-carder, a jobber, a circus act, a Yamcha, someone who was never going anywhere in the WWE, so he left. And after spending a few years doing some tremendous work on various fronts outside of the company, he came back, this time poised to be a top star. But because the average WWE fan knew very little about this, and to try and erase the damage done by his old Stardust role, it was important to make his rise to the top believable and present him to the WWE audience as someone worthy of a championship. And to do this, they had him rack up wins against Seth Rollins, The Miz, Finn Balor, Seth Rollins again, 29 other men in the Royal Rumble, Seth Rollins again, in Hell in a Cell, working with a legitimate torn pectoral muscle, my god, just look at it, the Royal Rumble, again, and perhaps most significantly, a win over the man that consistently looks like he just absorbed a grizzly bear, Brock Lesnar. One of the historically most dangerous and ferocious fighters, not just in the WWE, but in all of combat sports. This is a 10-time world champion, a former UFC champion, a man that boasts wins over Hulk Hogan, The Rock, Goldberg, John Cena, Triple H, Randy Orton, Kurt Angle, and the man who ended The Undertaker's unprecedented WrestleMania streak. You don't have to be a wrestling fan to get the picture, he is a bad motherfucker. And he's been one for over 2 decades, one of the most legitimate and over draws in all of professional wrestling. And with not 1, but 2 wins over Brock, WWE immediately created the illusion that Cody Rhodes was a realistic threat to the 1,316-day championship run of Roman Reigns. Echoes of Lesnar's frightening power, championships, opponents defeated, and prestige was all rolled into Rhodes with those 2 wins. Pro wrestling may be fake, but for it to feel real, details like this matter, and by Brock Lesnar laying down and doing the job like this, it anchors Cody's skill as remarkably high. And this is where Sans enters our little chat today. If you decide to kill every monster you can possibly encounter in the ruins of Undertale, you'll trigger the genocide run. Even to this day, it's a disturbing premise to me, and if you're watching this past a spoiler warning at the beginning, I'm gonna assume you're up to speed on the events that take place. Chara, the character you're playing as, kills everyone. The strong, the weak, familiar faces. It sucks. Now, one luxury that a game has over wrestling and other forms of storytelling is that it can communicate a character's strength by the difficulty of your encounter with them. You can set a good anchor of Metaton's skill simply by how much trouble you had dodging his attacks and outlasting him. The same goes for every boss encounter you have in your first pacifist or neutral run. In fact, the entire first run of this game is spent putting all of these characters over via their difficulty. But the genocide run does something different. It spends the entire time putting Chara over as immensely and terrifyingly powerful by showing Chara easily defeat each and every one of these well-established characters. And I keep saying Chara specifically and not you, because there are several times throughout the run where Chara will act without the player's input and even attacks the player. This dark, alternate timeline is less about you and getting monsters over through your struggle with them. It's about showing you the raw, unfiltered strength of this behemoth that you have created by having every highly anchored character put Chara over. And let's be clear, most of our old friends here go down in one swift blow, which is very different from a close matchup. In this run, Undertale uses the anchoring bias aggressively and asserts that Chara is worlds above each new anchor presented. It'd be like if I specified at the beginning that if you guessed around 800 feet, you need to start adding a lot of digits, my friend. These are squash matches, which are used in wrestling to shock the audience at just how mighty the winner truly appears after burying someone previously presented to be strong. It's not just the number of wins or quality of opponents that's important, how someone wins also genuinely matters. An underdog overcomes the odds to barely win in dramatic fashion, but a monster slaughters without breaking a sweat. And since we never get to fight Chara to experience their ferocity through difficulty, watching them do this over and over and over is the only way to illustrate how extraordinarily mighty they are. Finally, Chara meets Sans, and you can feel the gravity of what's about to unfold. The most overpowered entity in the game versus this mysterious skeleton who, on your first run, you really know very little about. And then just like that, Sans has made quick work of the strongest thing we have seen in the game. Sans goes over, and Chara becomes the jobber. All of the cruelty, all of the horror, all of the genocide stopped dead in its tracks by the easiest enemy. The Sans fight will go down in history as one of the toughest boss fights of the 2010s, and I know I said earlier that video games have the luxury of communicating a character's skill via difficulty, which we absolutely see here, but Toby Fox paired that illustration of Sans' skill with a page out of the pro wrestling book, and that's to have the top dog lay down for the new kid on the block and help put them over. Just like Brock Lesnar and all of his prestige made Cody Rhodes look sensational, simply standing opposed to Chara in dramatic fashion set the anchor exceedingly high and painted Sans out to be a real threat before the fight ever began. And by designing Sans' opening attack to catch you off guard and more than likely squash Chara on the first try, Toby rolled all of the strength and skill and horsepower and aggression and brutality and thunder and lightning Chara gathered directly into our boy Sans, the crowd favorite. And remember, it's not just the who here, but also the how. Yes, Sans squashes Chara in the first encounter, but he also toys with them throughout the full fight and even has a brief fourth wall breaking conversation with the player as he does. One of the most popular wrestlers working today is Orange Cassidy, popular despite the fact that historically he doesn't win a ton of matches, but he's hilarious to watch because he plays with the absurdity of pro wrestling just like Sans plays with the absurdity of video game boss fights. Selling and wrestling moves in general, when you know that wrestling is rigged, can come off as absurd and laughable. And Cassidy likes to poke fun at that by no-selling moves or by putting the least amount of effort possible into his own moves by keeping his hands in his pockets for most of the match. Sound familiar? Sans is cut of the same cloth. Why just stand there and let yourself get hit? Why just lay there and let yourself get jumped on? Why not open with your strongest attack? Why not enjoy yourself when everyone else is so serious? As you probably know, Sans will rack up a huge win streak against you before you finally manage to beat him, and once you do, you finally get to see what you think you want to see. The winning streak come to an end, and our beloved hero meeting a tragic fate. With your victory, Sans puts you over, and it feels both euphoric and dreadful all at the same time. You wanted this, you worked so hard for this, and yet, what does it cost you? What does it say about you that you'd stubbornly choose to be the villain even in the face of a Herculean obstacle? Does your ambition outweigh your conscience? Why were you so willing to commit so much fictional evil? Could you ever be so cruel in reality? Sans will always bring those feelings to mind. You will always carry that with you, and it's these sensations that make our encounter with him so deeply profound. Difficult enemies are not hard to find. I'm sure if I asked, you could compile your own personal syllabus of Melanias and Sephiroths and Mike Tysons, but I think the reason we remember Sans is because before you even get to the proper fight, before you realize just how difficult he is to beat, in that single first moment when he obliterates you and Chara before you're ready, you get it. Despite how little you've known until this point, you know exactly who and what he is now. Because of the anchoring bias, a little in-ring psychology, and a ravenous opponent, the gravity of his power was fully established before the fight ever truly began. Hey everyone, I hope you enjoyed this little trip down memory lane. It was far too special of a video for me personally to just not let it be on the channel anymore, and since enough time had passed, I thought it would be fun to give it the full remake treatment. For those of you who are pestering me about it, I hope it was worth the wait. If you're wondering about the original version of this video and want to give it a watch, you can do so over on my Patreon page where it's not blocked. For $1 a month, you can get access to that and so much other bonus content like live editing streams where I show how I make these, blooper reels, creative input, and other gooey goodness. If that sounds like it's for you, the link will be somewhere down below. A massive shout out to this month's featured patrons: Ashley Atkins, Magron, Ryan Rotundo, Kishan O2, Fahim Ahmed, Keegan, Lindsay, and Quincy King II. Thanks again for watching. Let me know if you remember watching the original back in the day down below. Like the video, share it, hit that subscribe button for more, and above all, please have yourself a damn good one.